Alright, let's start out with the motherboard, since there's some stuff that we can do before we set the motherboard inside the case. After I took everything out, this is what you got. You got the near field communication reader, the key fob, whatever this plate's called that goes on your case, wireless antenna, some kind of jumper, I guess for PCI slots, some SATA cables, USB male-to-male cable, this little box which apparently is a USB 3.0 expansion port. Go ahead and put on my anti-static wrist strap. I've got that tied into ground over here on my power supply. Right, here's a close-up of the motherboard. And let's pull the CPU out. Nothing special, just in that plastic box, exactly as you'd expect it. This is the thing that probably scares me the most, because I don't want to damage either of these, and I have no clue what I'm doing. Supposedly, let's see, important, install processor. First off, get your big head out of the way. So install processor first, then remove and keep the cover. All right. Is it possible not to touch this? Let's see. Let's flip it upside down and grab it by the edge. I don't think I touched anything but of any significance, so we'll just go ahead and put this back on there. Oh, we probably don't want to slam it down like that, and I don't know if that's supposed to come off or not, but it did. Let's put the bracket for the cooling system on there, and I'm going to skip the RAM for right now. I can just as easily do that when it's in the case, but it could cause problems when I go mount either the bracket for the cooling system or the cooling system itself. So let's go ahead and install that bracket. Here's what the cooling system looks like unboxed, and all I care about right now is whatever brackets I'm supposed to use and the screws. Install the back plate for the cooling system. I don't think there's any particular orientation that this has to go, as long as it fits. Female threaded nuts have to fit in there a particular way, or not a particular way, rather. They're adjustable, so if you don't have it the right way, it won't fit. I'll just go ahead and screw each one of them in a little bit. Screw them in all the way. One thing I don't yet understand is it seems like it's still loose. So maybe that's just how the bracket goes, and then once you tighten these down, it puts enough pressure to pull the bottom bracket out. I guess we could put the RAM in, but I don't think there's any reason to do that. Okay, that's what it looks like with the 4 standoffs on there, top and on the bottom. It's loose, so maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. Let's go ahead and get the case out. Well, I was afraid this was going to happen. My camera's not high enough to show the whole case. Everybody's seen unboxing of these. There's nothing to unbox. You take it out of the box, this is it. This is what you get, a big black box. So let me take the cover off. I'll mount the power supply, mount the radiator. All right, here's what it looks like with the cover off. And Fractal is so badass, they actually include a free hard drive. That's not a hard drive. The case comes with tons of screws and I guess everything you'll need to mount the motherboard and hard drives and all that stuff. Here's the power supply. Let's take it out and mount it in the case. I think I just found out why this power supply is so expensive. Let's see what all this stuff is. This is obviously the power supply. These are all the cords for the power supply that go to various peripherals. So we'll put those back up and deal with them when we need to. Okay, let's mount the power supply. Okay, now let's go ahead and mount the radiator. Probably can't see that well, but I've just got to take these sound dampening panels off. Take the radiator, set it down in there, and get you a screw and a washer, and screw it together. It matched up with some holes that were already there. Doesn't cover the whole thing, but that's how it looks after it's installed. Now let's go ahead and put the fans in. From what it looks like in the manual, the fans are supposed to be installed with this logo down. I'm not sure exactly where the wire should be, whether it should be down. I'm going to go ahead and make it go down. Now that I think about it, I guess you could probably install these before you install the whole shebang. Okay, all the screws in, I'll screw in. Okay, that's what it looks like with the fans installed. Still can't remember what this plate's called, but I'm going to say motherboard connector interface modulated phase high speed plate. You're not supposed to see that I'm reading the manual as I go, but that's what that is the manual. You can see the plates installed. I would recommend putting that in as soon as you get the case open. It was kind of difficult to do with all the radiator hoses in. I just dry fit the motherboard inside the case, and it looks like the motherboard might have an easier time getting in there before the cooling system, and it also looks like there's not enough clearance, so I may have to relocate it up a couple hole, or up one hole. It looks like that's all it has. Now I'm going to mount the standoffs for the motherboard. There's all the motherboard standoffs, and it looks like everywhere where there's an A is where a standoff needs to be for this particular motherboard. Looks like we got 9 of these little small screws, so those must be the ones for the standoffs, because there's 9 standoffs. That's what it looks like with the motherboard installed. It went in okay, but it seems like that possibly this header for USB 2.0 is just a little off. It's bent just a little. Everything else seems okay. Since the radiator and cooling system's not in yet, let's go ahead and put the RAM in and make sure our clearances are okay with it too. And the manual suggests that we put it in A2 and B2. Of course, you can't see anything with my big head in the way. Just seems to me that putting the RAM in, maybe some of the PCI cards or something like that, just should be done with the motherboard outside of the case. It just doesn't feel like there's enough support to withstand that pressure of putting these in and making sure that they're seated properly. So that's what it looks like with the RAM installed. I think the next thing we'll do would be the cooling system. And for the second time, it looks like there is clearance. Now we'll install the pump unit to the CPU. We'll go ahead and put this mounting bracket on top of here. And without touching the CPU or anything, I've dropped a mounting screw down in there. I can't get it, so it's time for the old tweezers. It's like that old Operation game. Except for with this one, you can actually fry a freaking $300 motherboard. So I'll get all these thumb tight. I'm just going to tighten them in a star pattern until they get tight. Motherboard, RAM, CPU, cooling system with fans and power supplies installed right now. The two fans connected to the radiator are now connected to CPU and CPU optional fan connectors. I couldn't find very many details in the manual about this, but I believe that that's where they're supposed to go. So that was the first time that I had to go to the internet. The way that the manual explains hooking up the CPU fans is to take this Y adapter and hook this into the fans. But as you can see, that's what appears to be a female connector, and that's exactly what's on the fans. So what you have to do is take this off. Once you take those off, that's what it looks like. That may be common knowledge, but I didn't know that. So we'll hook up the fans to these two connectors. I've already taken them out of the CPU input, and we'll hook this actually into the cooling unit. These two connectors are from the cooling unit, and this is supposedly a dummy load that connects to the motherboard. So the motherboard thinks that it has a fan, and this is power for the cooling unit. Right now I have both fans hooked up to the cooler unit. I have the USB out of the cooler unit hooked into this header down here at the bottom. And the only thing that I don't have hooked up is this dummy load. I have the case fan hooked up to chassis fan number 1. Since this is the biggest cable that came with the power supply, I would imagine it needs to get hooked up. It's not labeled, but I'm sure I could figure it out. Okay, I routed that wire through the back, and I'm not going to hook it up to the power supply just yet because it's on top of everything that I've got to connect. This has got 4 SATA power connectors on there, so I think I'll be able to span the whole case with just this one cable, which would be DVD player, 3 terabyte hard drive, SSD drive, and then power for the CPU cooler. I just now realized that there's a fan up front too. We'll go ahead and hook up all of these connections. We'll go ahead and hook up the headers for the front panel. I'll look at the speaker. Probably not going to hook up this USB 3.0 for the 2 ports on top. I'm going to use the only USB 3.0 header for the expansion panel, that 5 1/4 dry bay expansion panel that's got the SSD, or excuse me, the SD drive and all that stuff. There's not a hard drive LED. That header is now connected right there. And I also connected the USB 2.0 front connectors right there, and that's from the CPU cooler, I believe. I'm going to go ahead and connect the motherboard, since it looks like I'm almost done with all the other power supply connections, although there is one up here at the top of the board. I'll have to find out what that is to see if I need to connect to it or not. I did hook up that connector up there that was for the motherboard slash CPU and ran it behind the case and into the power supply unit. I hooked up the front fan to this particular fan plug on the motherboard. I know I have to hook up this USB 3.0 header to the 5 1/4 SD reader. I'll still need to do cable management. Might as well go ahead and mount the drives while I'm at it. Let's start with the SSD drive. I'm just gonna randomly put it here in the middle. We'll go ahead and mount the 3 terabyte drive now. I didn't relocate it up or down for this little chassis. I just used wherever it was at. I think it's probably time to take the case and move it upright and mount the other devices.